So how do you build the largest land empire in history? You're probably thinking of armies, right? All those horsemen, all that conquest. But what if the real secret wasn't the sword at all, but the speed of information? We're going to explore the invisible infrastructure that really powered the Mongol Empire.
Okay, picture this. It's the winter of 1241. A gigantic Mongol army, led by Batu Khan, has just completely steamrolled the armies of Poland and Hungary. I mean, the road to Vienna and really the rest of Europe is wide open. There is nothing left to stop them. And then, they just pack up and leave. For centuries, nobody in Europe had a clue why, and the answer is the key to understanding how the whole Mongol Empire actually worked.
So, what on earth happened? One minute the Mongol forces are there on the Hungarian plain, victorious, totally unstoppable, and the next, they're just gone. The answer? It turns out, was thousands and thousands of kilometers away.
Right here, this is the moment history just pivots. Way over in Mongolia, the great Khan, Ugade, dies. A single messenger then travels 5,000 kilometers, across a frozen continent, mind you, and arrives just a few weeks later. And the message? Come home. You see, Mongol law demanded that all the princes had to return to elect a new Khan. So, just like that, the invasion was called off. An entire continent was saved by one message, delivered at a speed that was just thought to be impossible.
Now, this one event tells you everything you need to know about the huge problem the Mongols were facing. It's one thing to conquer all that land. It's another thing entirely to actually govern it. They were fighting what historians call the tyranny of distance. I mean, how do you control an empire that stretches from the Pacific Ocean all the way to the Danube River?
Let's just try to wrap our heads around the scale here. The Mongol Empire covered 24 million square kilometers. To put that into perspective for you, that's roughly the size of the entire continent of Africa. It was, and still is, the largest single land empire the world has ever seen. Just wow.
And get this, the demographic challenge was just mind-boggling. The core Mongol population was maybe 1 to 2 million people, and they were ruling over 100 million subjects. A vast sea of different cultures, languages, and religions. They were outnumbered by at least 50 to 1. How could they possibly keep control?
This is how. This is the answer. Without an organized system, a message from the capital in Mongolia to a general in Hungary would take 3, maybe 4 months. By the time it got there, the war might be over. But with the Mongol system, that same message arrived in just 3 to 4 weeks. They somehow turned the ungovernable into the governable.
So what was this revolutionary system? You know, it wasn't just a simple mail service. It was more like the empire's central nervous system. It was the mechanism that let the great Khan's will be felt thousands of kilometers away, almost in real time. It was called the Yam. It was this incredibly sophisticated network of relay stations set up by Ugade Khan. Yep, the same ruler whose death saved Europe. Each station was packed with fresh horses, food, supplies, everything an official messenger would need, ready to go at a moment's notice.
Now, of course, other empires had postal systems. The Persians had their famous Royal Road, the Romans had their cursus publicus. But just look at these numbers. The Yam was almost as fast as the Persian system, but it operated over double the distance. It was this unique combination of pure speed and just unprecedented scale that no one had ever pulled off before.
So, how did they actually do it? On the ground, I mean. Across deserts, over mountains, through hostile territories? The details are pretty fascinating. Well, for starters, they built a massive infrastructure project. At its peak, there were more than 1,400 of these Yam stations, all strategically placed along the empire's major routes. You can think of it as a pre-modern highway system, but for information. And the key that unlocked this entire system was a small metal tablet called a paisa. This was basically your official all-access pass. Messengers carried it to prove they were on official business, letting them demand fresh horses, food, whatever they needed from any station, and different metals, gold, silver, bronze, showed how urgent your mission was. A gold paisa? Yeah, you had top priority, no questions asked. The logistics of this are just staggering. To keep the whole thing running, the Yam kept a permanent stable of over 50,000 horses across the empire, ready to be swapped out at any time. This was a huge, incredibly expensive operation.
And we know this isn't just a legend. We have eyewitness accounts. The famous traveler Marco Polo, who actually used the system himself, wrote about seeing stations with hundreds of horses just waiting. For a long time, people thought he was exaggerating, but his stories have been backed up by Chinese records and even modern archaeology.
The process itself was just brutally efficient. A messenger would ride flat out for about 40 to 50 kilometers to the next station. There, they'd flash their paisa, swap their totally exhausted horse for a fresh one in just a matter of minutes, and then they were off again. The message itself never stopped moving, day or night, which is how it could cover such astonishing distances so quickly.
So what was the ultimate impact of all this? The yam wasn't just some clever logistical trick, it was the bedrock of Mongol power, and its fate was completely tied to the fate of the empire itself.
The yam let the Mongols do three key things that nobody else could. First, they could coordinate these massive, simultaneous invasions on multiple fronts. Second, they could get vital intelligence from their spies back to commanders in time to actually use it. And third, they could enforce the Great Khan's laws and collect taxes across their huge territory. It's what turned them from conquerors into rulers of a functioning state.
But, a system this incredible was also incredibly fragile. It depended on everyone being unified. So as the empire started to fracture into these competing khanates, which was the main reason for the collapse, they started fighting each other. The yam stations on their new borders, they just got abandoned. And on top of that, a huge fiscal crisis, because no new conquests meant no new money, made the whole system too expensive to maintain. The empire's nervous system just fell apart.
The yam's legacy is really complex. It's got a huge shadow. On the one hand, it created the Pax Mongolia, a century of peace that allowed for amazing trade and the exchange of ideas, like gunpowder, between East and West. But that same incredible network of connection had a really dark side. It also became a superhighway for the Black Death, helping it spread across the continent with terrifying speed.
So, in the end, what does this all mean? We tend to think of empires in terms of their big armies and famous leaders. But the story of the yam shows us the true power is often built on something way less glamorous: logistics, administration, and the simple mechanisms that conquer distance and time. When that mechanism broke, the empire broke right along with it.
And that kind of leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? The yam was the invisible network of its day, a communication system that literally shaped the world. It really makes you wonder, what are the invisible logistical and communication systems that we all depend on today? And maybe more importantly, just how fragile are they?